This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, BACFA. Hey there, everyone around the world. It's BACFA again with a new Atomic Biscuits 2025-04-27 up in smoke. We're going to start this week out over at ZeroHedge.com. They have the story Bug and Tug. World Economic Forum investigates Klaus Schwab over in-room massages and other allegations. This is by Tyler Durden. One day after it was reported that World Economic Forum founder Klaus Schwab, 88, resigned as chairman after 55 years, the Wall Street Journal reports that Schwab is under investigation by the organization he created after a whistleblower alleged financial and ethical misconduct by Mr. Bugs and his wife. In an anonymous letter sent to the board of directors by current and former Forum employees, Schwab and his wife are accused of commingling their personal affairs with World Economic Forum resources without proper oversight, and much, much more. Amongst the most serious allegations, Schwab asked junior employees to withdraw thousands of dollars from ATMs on his behalf and used Forum funds to pay for private in-room massages at hotels. His wife Hilda, a former Forum employee, scheduled token Forum-funded meetings in order to justify luxury holiday travel at the organization's expense. The letter also raises concerns about how Klaus Schwab treated female employees and how his leadership over decades allegedly allowed instances of sexual harassment and other discriminatory behavior to go unchecked in the workplace. Other allegations include the Schwab family's use of Villa Mundi, a luxury property bought before the pandemic by the Forum located next to the organization's Geneva headquarters, which the whistleblower letter maintains that Hilda Schwab maintains tight control over and which the Forum paid $30 million to purchase and another $20 million to renovate, also overseen by Hilda. In recent days, Schwab is said to have railed against an investigation, telling board members that he denied the allegations and would challenge them in a lawsuit, according to the report. Instead, the board launched a probe during an emergency meeting on Easter Sunday. In response, Schwab resigned immediately as chairman versus staying on for an extended transitionary period as previously planned. A spokesman for the Schwabs told the Journal that they deny every allegation in the whistleblower complaint and that Klaus will file a lawsuit against whoever's behind it and anybody who spreads these mistruths. Furthermore, Schwab says he paid the World Economic Forum back for said in-room massages and denied the allegations about luxury travel and withdrawing funds. According to the World Economic Forum, its board unanimously supported the decision to launch an independent investigation following a whistleblower letter containing allegations against former chairman Klaus Schwab. This decision was made after consultation with external legal counsel. We feel compelled to share a comprehensive account of systemic governance failures and abuses of power that have taken place over many years under the unchecked authority of Klaus Schwab, reads the letter, which states it was from current and former Forum employees. The organizer of the annual Davos conference has been shaking up its leadership in recent weeks in response to a previous board probe into its workplace culture. In a recent memo, Borgbrand, the Forum's CEO, said the Forum would take steps to address leadership issues identified by the prior probe and that the investigation didn't substantiate the allegations against its founder. A few weeks ago, Schwab, 87, said he'd step down as non-executive chairman of the Forum's board, and the Forum said the succession process would be completed by January 2027. The whistleblower letter blew up that timeline. Behind the scenes, a high-stakes boardroom drama unfolded, pitting Schwab against the global power players on the Forum's board. The board includes celebrities like cellist Yo-Yo Ma and politicians like Al Gore. It also has business leaders like AXA Group CEO Thomas Buberl and Accent CEO Julie Sweet. It's no surprise that Schwab's relationship with the board had been deteriorating over the past year, according to said report. And there's a link to a YouTube video here as well. Well, the bugs eat the bugs. I don't know. I listen to this kind of stuff and it seems almost too good to be true. But I think what we'll be finding is that the guy who is following in his footsteps into leadership is maybe even just as bad. These guys and their I want to rule the world philosophies are no less Hitlerian than those that we saw in World War II. Why do we tolerate it? Why do we participate with it? And how do they get so powerful? It's worth watching what's going on with the World Economic Forum in the weeks ahead. Over at theblaze.com, Blaze Media posts, Trump administration ends Biden's free ride. 5+ million deadbeat student loan borrowers to face collections. This is by Candace Hathaway. My question was, well, how do you get a lot of Democrats to agree with Trump that the Department of Education should be shuttered? I think I found it. President Donald Trump's Department of Education announced Monday that it will soon end the former Biden administration's free ride for student loan borrowers in default. The Education Department's Office of Federal Student Aid will restart collections on May 5th for more than 5 million borrowers who have not made a payment for at least 360 days. Another 4 million borrowers, not yet considered to be in default, have not paid in 91 to 180 days. As a result, there could be almost 10 million borrowers in default in a few months. When this happens, almost 25% of the federal student loan portfolio will be in default, read a press release from the Education Department. According to the department, 42.7 million student loan borrowers owe over $1.6 trillion. It noted that most borrowers are either delinquent or in an interest-free forbearance or deferment period. Only 38% of borrowers are in repayment and current on their student loans, it said. Resuming collections protects taxpayers from shouldering the cost of federal student loans that borrowers willingly undertook to finance their post-secondary education. The department has not collected on its defaulted student loans since March of 2020, despite Congress mandating repayment in October of 2023. Trump's Education Department slammed the former administration for its refusal to lift the pause on collections, which kept borrowers in a confusing limbo. It further noted that under former President Joe Biden, the Education Department failed to process applications for borrowers who applied for income-driven repayment and continued to push misguided on-ramps and illegal loan forgiveness schemes to win points with borrowers and mask rising delinquency and default rates. Over the next couple of weeks, the FSA will notify those currently in default about the payment restart. It will begin sending notifications of wage garnishments later this summer, the department stated. Education Department Secretary Linda McMahon said American taxpayers will no longer be forced to serve as collateral for irresponsible student loan policies. The Biden administration misled borrowers. The executive branch does not have the constitutional authority to wipe away debt, nor do the loan balances simply disappear, she continued. Hundreds of billions have already been transferred to taxpayers. Going forward, the Department of Education, in conjunction with the Department of Treasury, will shepherd the student loan program responsibly and according to the law, which means helping borrowers return to repayment, both for the sake of their own financial health and for the nation's economic outlook. That's over at theblaze.com. Insect relaunched their research platform, Recorded Future, again this week, and it had some new and different kinds of articles. It's kind of interesting to see what the security world is talking about. This article was called Iran's AI Ambitions, Balancing Economic Isolation with National Security Imperatives. Iran recognizes the vital role artificial intelligence, or AI, will play in its future economic viability, regional influence, and national security, and has begun to implement a top-down effort to achieve regional technological competitiveness. Since the supreme leader issued a directive in 2021, Iran has endeavored to develop a national strategy and oversight mechanism for AI and foster a technological ecosystem to drive domestic research and development. However, two key factors, Tehran's global economic isolation and its deeply entrenched system of government control and oversight, have almost certainly hindered Iran's national AI development. In 2024, as Tehran's support for its proxies Hamas and Hezbollah against Israel embroiled Iran in unprecedented regional conflicts and ongoing cyber warfare, new insights emerged about how Iran has implemented AI technologies in its national security apparatus. Iran has used AI to bolster its capabilities in four main areas: cyber attacks, influence operations, military and intelligence systems, and domestic repression. These priorities will continue to propel Iran's development and implementation of AI, almost certainly posing an increasing threat to Iran's Western and regional adversaries. In cyberspace, AI will likely augment Iranian threat actors' spearphishing and social engineering tradecraft, while AI's implementation in Iran's drone and missile arsenal is likely to pose the greatest physical threat from emerging technology. Iran's approach to AI will likely mirror its broader strategic ambitions to be a regional power and assert its national sovereignty by building and implementing advanced technological capabilities. Iranian government initiatives are likely to be the driving force behind Iran's AI development priorities, particularly given the absence of a flourishing AI private sector. While Tehran will promote its own technological prowess and indigenous AI development, Iranian government is likely to leverage its relationship with China and Russia in various security realms to bolster its AI technology capabilities. Private industry, particularly companies in the AI or technology resources industry, should closely monitor end users of their models or materials to ensure Iranian threat actors are not using their products or acquiring controlled technologies. Similarly, governments should invest in identifying and preventing the Iranian defense industry from acquiring AI technologies that enhance its military capabilities. And it goes on, but I think that what's really striking here is this is the same problem we're seeing with nukes, loose nukes, that whole sum of all fears thing. When we start to mix up artificial intelligence and war games and war machines like drones or ground craft, then we really have approached that singularity promised by the movies in the Terminator series, that we'll lose control and we'll become subjugated by our very own equipment. It sounds far-fetched until you start to look at what they're doing with modern tech. Anyway, this is over at recordedfuture.com. I would encourage you to come over and have a look at the rest of the article and dig into the details there. I'm sure you remember how the movie The Terminator opens, where it has these, it's dark and there are these tanks that are rolling over human skulls, to demonstrate this is post-apocalypse. This is just bones being ground underfoot, right? By the boot of the machine. Well, here's this article from libertarianinstitute.org in the stack of stuff this week. Is Israel deploying unmanned bulldozers in Gaza. The Israeli military has increasingly opted to deploy an unmanned version of Caterpillar's D9 bulldozers to a number of battlefields. The remotely operated systems allow the IDF to flatten areas without risking additional troops. According to the Times of Israel, Tel Aviv has deployed the unmanned D9 or Robodozer to Gaza and Lebanon since October 7, 2023, and Israeli officials say the IDF is ramping up its use of the system. One source told AFP Israel has used robotic tools for over a decade, but in very small numbers. Now it's being used in large-scale warfare. The Robodozer was developed by Israel Aerospace Industries, IAI, which claims the platform is the ultimate combat bulldozer. IAI's website explains that the Robodozer's integration into the military engineering units significantly boosts their capability to rapidly alter landscapes to favor defensive or offensive operations. While the Robodozer can be remotely controlled, IAI claims it can even operate autonomously. As the Jerusalem Post reported last month, IAI says it can operate on several levels of autonomous independence, allowing it to dig trenches in the field, clear a route in difficult or otherwise impassable areas, and move large or suspicious obstacles. I wonder if it has a piece of paper under its tongue. That's curious. While the company stresses that the platform ensures the safety of Israeli soldiers no longer have to drive combat bulldozers in dangerous situations, it does not mention if the Robodozer can identify and avoid civilians during autonomous operation. The Israeli state arms maker is also in the process of developing an unmanned M113 armored personnel carrier. Combat bulldozers have played a major role in Israel's military operations in Gaza, where large swaths of territory have been flattened by Israeli bombs. As the rubble is littered with unexploded munitions and potential Hamas-planted explosives, the IDF has used a large number of D9s to clear regions that were once cities in Gaza. Tel Aviv has declared a buffer zone along the borders of Gaza, and Defense Minister of Israel Katz recently expanded that zone to include the entire southern city of Rafah. Israeli forces have destroyed most structures in those areas and kill any Palestinians who try to approach. Katz said that Gaza will become smaller and more isolated, and more of its residents will be forced to evacuate from the fighting zones. Additionally, the IDF has built corridors that bisect the strip, flattening the infrastructure in those areas as well. Israel now controls over 50% of Gaza. And I dare say a bit more, considering who's fighting back. They're going to absolutely eliminate all of those people from that strip of land and build it anew. Again, this is over at libertarianinstitute.org.
Just get the perfect lens, plus what you have within. Then next his eyes are squint, then he's picked up your scent. La 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 la, warm it up. La 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 la, the boys are waiting. La 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 la, warm it up. La 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 la, the boys are waiting. My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, and they're like, it's better than yours. Damn right,
Make America healthy again? Well, one of the ways that they're going to do that is by removing some of these dyes and artificial things from our food supply that have been banned around the world, but for some reasons remain in the United States food supply. I can recall back when my family was in farming and they did peanut exports, the cream of the crop, the best of the best peanuts would go to Europe because the EU had very strict regulations about what they would take in. And of course, the remainder would go to the American market, and then the stuff that was kind of inedible would go to animals. The thing is, when you grow something, you kind of want to keep some of the good stuff for yourself. And of course, the farmers will do that, but Americans also ought to have access to the best of the best if they want to pay for it. Anyway, this article is from apnews.com. U.S. health officials seek to phase out artificial dyes from the food supply. U.S. health officials on Tuesday said they would urge food makers to phase out petroleum-based artificial colors in the nation's food supply, but stopped short of promising a formal ban and offered few specifics on how they intended to achieve this sweeping change. Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Marty Makary said at a news conference the agency would take steps to eliminate the synthetic dyes by the end of 2026, largely by relying on voluntary efforts from the food industry. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who joined the gathering, said he had heard from food manufacturers but had no formal agreements with them. "We don't have an agreement, we have an understanding," Kennedy said. The officials said the FDA would establish a standard and timeline for industry to switch to natural alternatives, revoke authorization for dyes not in production within the coming weeks, and take action to remove remaining dyes on the market. Today, the FDA is asking food companies to substitute petrochemical dyes with natural ingredients for American children, as they already do in Europe and Canada, Makary said. The proposed move is aimed at boosting children's health, he added. For the last 50 years, we've been running one of the largest uncontrolled scientific experiments in the world on our nation's children without their consent, he said. The process to revoke approved additives from the food supply typically takes several years and requires public comment, agency review, and final rulemaking procedures. Industry groups said that the chemicals are safe and suggested they would try to negotiate with regulators to keep them available. FDA and regulatory bodies around the world have deemed our products and ingredients safe, and we look forward to working with the Trump administration and Congress on this issue, said Christopher Gendelsberger, spokesman for the National Confectioners Association. We are in firm agreement that science-based evaluation of food additives will help eliminate consumer confusion and rebuild trust in our national food safety system. Health advocates have long called for the removal of artificial dyes from foods, citing mixed studies indicating that they can cause neurobehavioral problems, including hyperactivity and attention issues in some children. The FDA has maintained that the approved dyes are safe and that the totality of scientific evidence shows that most children have no adverse effects when consuming foods containing color additives. That's right, most. The FDA currently allows 36 food color additives, including 8 synthetic dyes. In January, the agency announced that the dye known as Red 3, used in candies, cakes, and some medications, would be banned in food by 2027 because it caused cancer in laboratory rats. So, yeah, it's totally safe. Believe me, it's totally safe. Totes safe. Artificial dyes are used widely in U.S. foods. In Canada and in Europe, where synthetic colors are required to carry warning labels, manufacturers mostly use natural substitutes. Several states, including California and West Virginia, have passed laws restricting the use of artificial color in foods. The announcement drew praise from advocates who say the dyes carry health risks and serve no purpose beyond the cosmetic. Their only purpose is to make food companies money, said Dr. Peter Lurie, president of the Center for Science and the Public Interest and a former FDA official. Food dyes help make ultra-processed foods more attractive, especially to children, often by masking the absence of a colorful ingredient, like fruit. Removing artificial dyes from foods has long been a goal of so-called Maha moms, key supporters of Kennedy and his Make America Healthy Again initiatives. They were among protesters who signed petitions and rallied outside the Michigan headquarters of W.K. Kellogg Company last year, demanding that the company remove artificial dyes from its breakfast cereals in the United States. Health officials insisted that food makers wanted clarity on the issue and were receptive to the changes, but the response from industry groups was mixed. Consumer Brands Association, a trade group for food manufacturers, said it had long asked FDA to assert its authority to regulate foods at a national level rather than leaving it to a patchwork of state laws. But in a statement, the group also urged FDA officials to prioritize research that is objective, peer-reviewed, and relevant to human health and safety. It added that the ingredients in question have been rigorously studied and demonstrated to be safe. Hours before the announcement, the International Dairy Foods Association said its members would voluntarily eliminate artificial colors in milk, cheese, and yogurt products sold to U.S. school meal programs by July of 2026. Other industry groups didn't pledge any quick changes. The International Association of Color Manufacturers said requiring reformulation in less than 2 years ignores scientific evidence and underestimates the complexity of food production. This process is neither simple nor immediate, and the resulting supply disruptions will limit access to familiar, affordable grocery items. Removing dyes from the food supply will not address the chief health problems that plague Americans, said Susan Main, a Yale University chronic disease expert and former director of the FDA's Food Center. With every one of their announcements, they're focusing in on something that's not going to accomplish what they say it is, Main said of Kennedy's initiatives. Most of these food dyes have been in our food supply for 100 years, so why aren't they driving toward reductions in things that do drive chronic disease rates? In the past, FDA officials said the threat of legal action from the food industry required the government to have significant scientific evidence before banning additives. Red No. 3 was banned from cosmetics more than 3 decades before it was stripped from food and medicine. It took 5 decades for the FDA to ban brominated vegetable oil because of health concerns. Some of the state laws banning synthetic dyes in school meals have aggressive timelines. West Virginia's ban, for example, prohibits red, yellow, blue, and green artificial dyes in school meals starting August 1st. A broader ban will extend the restrictions to all foods sold in the state on January 1st, 2028. Many U.S. food companies are already reformulating their foods. According to Sensient Colors, one of the world's largest producers of food dyes and flavorings, in place of synthetic dyes, food makers can use natural hues made from beets, algae, and crushed insects, and pigments from purple sweet potatoes, radishes, and cabbages. So there it is, right? Buried at the bottom, crushed insects. Eat the bugs. So look, I'm all for eliminating ultra-processed foods that are horrible for us. It's not real food. It's plastic. It doesn't have any real value, right? You should eat real food. But can we please not grind up bugs to get the shellac to put on the outside of the M&Ms? I mean, can we not do that, please? Can we not get to something familiar and good for us that doesn't include horrible ingredients? That's all I ask. All natural doesn't mean I have to eat insects. That's my line. That's my line.
She comes on like a rose, but everybody knows she'll get you in touch. You can look, but you better not touch. Poison ivy, poison ivy. Late at night while you're sleeping, poison ivy comes a-creeping around. She's pretty as a daisy, but look out, man, she's crazy. She'll really do you in if you let her get under your skin. Poison ivy, poison ivy. Late at night while you're sleeping, poison habit comes a creeping around. Measles make you bumpy, and mumps will make you lumpy, and chicken pox will make you jump and twitch. A common cold will fool ya, and whooping cough can cool ya, but poison ivy Lord will make you itch. You're gonna need an ocean of calamine lotion. You'll be scratching like a hound the minute you start to mess around. Poison ivy, poison ivy. Late at night while you're sleeping, poison ivy comes a creeping around. Measles make you bumpy, and mumps will make you lumpy, and chicken pox will make you jump and twitch. A common cold will fool ya, and whooping cough can cool ya, but poison ivy Lord will make you itch. You're gonna need an ocean of calamine lotion. You'll be scratching like a hound the minute you start to mess around. Poison ivy, poison ivy. Late at night while you're sleeping, poison ivy comes a creeping around. La 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 la.
RedState.com had this article by Jim Thompson, Postmortem. New book details how TDS, media hacks, and healthcare experts lied us into COVID lockdowns. Fauci or Faustian, I'm not quite sure which bargain we made. My wife and I were walking into a restaurant. The sun was out. The weather was perfect. A man walking towards us was wearing a mask. His eyes told his story, wide-eyed and terrified, horrified of us. We were unmasked. He took a wide berth while he pulled his arm up to his face. He was warding off imaginary demons. That moment encapsulated a year that changed America, and not for the better. I had many absurd moments like the above. A woman screamed at me for not being masked. I was in a park 50 yards from her. A couple scolded me through their cloth masks. I was walking my dog and my face was exposed. I was exposing them to COVID gremlins, or so they thought. Just weeks before airline passengers were allowed to remove face muzzles, a flight attendant threatened me with, "Are we going to have a problem?" My sin was wearing my mask a half-inch too low for the COVID mask enforcer. Caused this cultish behavior? Who is to blame? There are plenty of people who played God and ruined lives. Fauci and his toady Deborah Birx share blame for their deceptions, fact manipulations, and fictional mitigations. Doctors who questioned mandates or efficacy were forced into submission. They were threatened with job extinction for questioning not just data, but a dearth of it. Teacher union heads, principally the execrable Randy Weingarten, topped the list of real-life villains. Weingarten and others like her used the power of union intimidation to close schools. Children were forced to stare at screens while teachers wore pajamas and taught from their bedrooms. Senior citizens were locked away, and many died alone, unable to see their families as they took their last breaths. Healthcare professionals offered hollow assurances that it was for the best. Of course it wasn't. Too much of it was built on dubious science or outright lies. A new book offers some compelling reasons for who was responsible and why it happened. David Zweig's book titled An Abundance of Caution is an exhaustive study of how and why public policy was often shaped not by bad data or faulty science, but by no data. The CDC was responsible for forcing Americans into a 6-foot distancing regime. The media played that as a hard and fast rule. The media sold that as a thing that would save lives. One could not walk into a business without being that thing being pushed as science. Round, red, 6 feet apart stickers were placed in aisles, warning everyone to keep their distance. Was it based on science? No, it was not. From Fauci's congressional testimony is this quote. Dr. Fauci testified that This guidance, which shuts down schools and small businesses nationwide, just sort of appeared and was not based on any scientific studies. Majority Counsel, do you recall when discussions regarding kind of at least a 6-foot threshold began? Dr. Fauci, the 6 foot in the school? Majority Counsel, 6 foot overall. 6 foot was applied at businesses. Yeah. It was applied in schools. It was applied here. At least that's how the messaging was applied, that 6 foot distancing was the distance that needed to be. I don't recall. It just sort of appeared. I don't recall. Like a discussion of whether it should be 5 or 6 or whatever. It was just that 6 foot is. Do you see any studies that supported 6 feet? I was not aware of studies that, in fact, that would be a very difficult study to do. Children were kept away from teachers, away from school, away from learning. Why? Because we said so, substituted for facts. Zweig recounts a parent's story. We would get notes home with staff expressing frustration that our daughter wouldn't listen to the teacher via the laptop, the parent said. Remarkably, the girl's teacher was right down the hall, conducting remote learning from within the building, but in a separate room, a practice a number of teachers carried out. What a joke, Allison Babb, one of the APE parents, said. While European schools returned to teaching in person, American schools and teachers' unions were demanding remote teaching, and once back in school, physical barriers between each student and HEPA filters in every classroom. Was there data backing up these demands? No. But there was a source, a 14-year-old girl. The daughter of a man named Robert Glass produced a 2007 computer model that claimed that in the event of a pandemic, closing schools and keeping students at home during a pandemic would remove the transmission potential and would be effective at thwarting its spread within a community. The CDC was eager to adopt the Glass model as a standard. The CDC produced 2 policy reports using Laura Glass's school project as a basis for closing America down, using a dearth of hard data. The Glasses concluded that schools form the backbone of viral spread in an epidemic. Robert Glass claimed that by closing schools, businesses could stay open. Was this based on data? No, but the CDC used it anyway in 2 reports. Contained in the CDC reports was a footnote. Zweig dove into the footnote rabbit hole. 6 links later, he found the wellspring. The claim was based on nonsense. Quote, our assumption is the 37% of transmission occurs in the contexts with the within school transmission coefficient being twice that of the within workplace coefficient. However, this choice is arbitrary, end quote. American schools were closed, children lost a year of learning, and Americans were denied access to normalcy because someone figuratively threw a dart at a board. Zweig blames the media. Unmasked, the media vomited out talking points without questioning if those talking points were fact-based. He also blames healthcare officials for using garbage as a substitute for data. Garbage in, garbage out. Of course, he's right. Zweig also blames TDS. He notes that at one point the American Academy of Pediatrics forcefully recommended that schools reopen. When Trump recommended the same thing, the Academy changed direction, U-turning soon thereafter with the help of teachers' unions. It became a binary choice. If Trump recommended something or agreed with doctors, it must be bad. An abundance of caution is worth the time, but only if you're willing to read about a year-long train wreck and how experts ruined lives. The cover photo features a classroom with desks. Each desk has an opaque barrier. When some children were allowed to return to a classroom, they were still alone, imprisoned behind useless, arbitrary barriers. I had no trust in the media before reading this book. I had some trust in experts, but this book further disabused me of that nugget of trust. The experts didn't just destroy lives, they took a wrecking ball to any trust I had in their opinions. Perhaps that's a good thing. Most people will no longer just trust the experts because that expert might use a child's model and call it science. That's over at redstate.com.
Feel the rhythm, chant the rhyme. Come on along and have a real good time. Like the days of stomping at your boy. Now we're free. Oh, what a joy. Just come on down to the 54. Find a spot out on the floor. Ah, freak out. Let freak say shit. Freak out. Ah, freak out. Let freak say shit. Freak out. Ah, freak out. Let freak say shit. Freak out. Ah, freak out. Let freak say shit. Freak out. Ah, freak out. Let freak say shit. Freak out. Ah, freak out. Let freak say shit. Freak out. Ah, freak out. Let freak say shit. Freak out. Ah, freak out.
FreeBeacon.com, the home of the Washington Free Beacon, had this article. Alex Soros mocks fellow billionaires who made their own money. Bunch of nice Jewish boys who kind of gamed the system, is the quote. Facebook and Uber founders really believe their own bullshit, George Soros' heir tells the New York Magazine. This is by Matthew Zhao. Alex Soros, the heir to multi-billionaire Democrat megadonor George Soros, in an interview mocked the founders of Facebook and Uber for having really believed their own bullshit and groaned at the mention of a climate group that his family has bankrolled for years. Facebook and Uber founders are a bunch of nice Jewish boys who kind of gamed the system and, oh, let's not become doctors, lawyers. I'm helping the world by putting taxis out of business. Alex Soros, who is Jewish, told New York Magazine as he sat in an Uber en route to a museum exhibition in New York. Unlike Soros, who now oversees his father's $20 billion political empire, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg and Uber founders Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp grew up in relatively ordinary households and did not inherit their fortunes. Soros, known for his lavish lifestyle, ties to political elites, and relationship with Hillary Clinton confidant Huma Abedin, took over his father's empire in 2022, frustrating many longtime insiders who had expected his older, more measured half-brother to inherit the role, according to New York. George Soros is one of the biggest donors to liberal causes through his Open Society foundations, spending more than $18 billion of his fortune on everything from soft-on-crime prosecutors to a fake news network to anti-Israel nonprofits. When one of those groups, the environmentalist Sunrise Movement, came up during the interview, Alex Soros made a face and groaned, "What the hell did they do, by the way?" He said the Soros Family Democracy PAC has donated hundreds of thousands to Sunrise Movement alone, including $250,000 during the 2020 election cycle. The Washington Free Beacon reported on it at the time. Soros says his priority remains power, however the Democrats can attain it, New York reported. His goal, meanwhile, is to prevent more winning from President Donald Trump and Republicans. Both Soros and his father are result-driven, he told the magazine. We like to win. Wow, what a complete goober. We'll just have to keep an eye on him. Too much money and not a lick of sense. That whole business with Huma Abedin, wasn't her husband the one who was getting the information that Hillary Clinton somehow had leaked into Huma's laptop, and then he was, Carlos Danger and doing, good gracious, what a bunch of losers. DailyCaller.com had this article, "Do not capitulate. Ex-Biden disinformation czar goes to Europe to advocate against U.S. autocracy." Now, I gotta say, when people who represent, let's call it the shadow government, which is a term that is routinely used in Europe, that is not a term we have ever used here in the States. This is a new thing that we're going to have, not a group who maybe aren't in power, the minority voice, but the same power, but a shadow group, the ones waiting to step into the light as soon as they beat the other guys. It's another dysfunction of the duality that they experience when trying to explain how they're not in power. See, if they say democracy, they're talking about, well, when most people say they want this, then that majority rules. Except they're in the minority, and that really messes them up. Then it's all about, well, we want a seat at the table. Minorities should get a voice and a vote as well. But when you turn the tables around, they don't want minority voices speaking. They have a mandate. They're in charge. It's always their way or the highway, and whatever mental disorder they have to deploy to get people to believe that, including themselves, well, they do it. This is by Marianne Angela. Nina Jankowicz, the head of former President Joe Biden's Disinformation Governance Board, urged the EU to stand firm, not against adversaries like Russia, but against the United States. And I got to say, I think that they should throw this chick in the brig. I mean, this is not Dixie chicks going out there and complaining about politics. This is about someone who, as an administration official, albeit deposed, thrown out on her ass, really. It's not just a policy difference. This is railing against your own country. That puts you in a very strange place when it comes to what you can do and what you can say. And I know that the folks in Europe understand what I'm talking about. In the UK, your voice is chilled. You can't say everything you'd like to say. It's a problem because there's policing, and it's kept things it's kept things quiet. I'll put it that way. So it's important for folks here in the United States to pick up on those things, to report on those things, and rebroadcast them for those who can't. The European Parliament's Special Committee on the European Democracy Shield held a hearing to discuss Russia's disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, espionage, and other hybrid threats targeting Europe. During the hearing, Jankowicz made an appeal to EU leaders. I would like to call upon you to stand firm against another autocracy, the United States of America. The Trump administration is undoubtedly preparing a pressure campaign to force EU institutions to roll back regulation like the DSA, the Digital Services Act, to end support for Ukraine, to stop holding Russia to account, Jankowicz said. Do not capitulate, hold the line. Doing so is the clearest signal the European Union could send to Russia and other adversaries that it will not stop fighting to preserve democracy at home and around the world. Jankowicz accused tech elites of enabling global instability and alleged that President Donald Trump had aligned himself with them to consolidate power. Anti-democrat regimes in Russia, China, Iran, and elsewhere are taking advantage of this environment, launching interference campaigns that aim to undermine the democratic process with little pushback, Jankowicz said, and homegrown anti-democratic forces have launched a coordinated campaign to undermine researchers, journalists, advocates, and civil servants who work to expose their lies. The confluence of these forces has hobbled some democracies' responses to the strategic threat that we are here to discuss today, Russian hybrid threats. Jankowicz also criticized Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Just last week in the United States, Secretary of State Marco Rubio gleefully announced that he was obliterating the office tasked with tracking and responding to foreign information manipulation and interference, Jankowicz said. Many other U.S. government institutions have been similarly dismantled in the months since President Trump took office, all under the guise of protecting free speech and allegedly, quote, ending censorship. I won't go on. You can come read this Daily Caller thing yourself, but I gotta say, if this woman isn't a operative, I don't know what is. She's absolute cancer. So whatever she's up to, you can bet it's no good. This story is over at dailycaller.com.
Where you'll be, I'll go. Where you'll be, I'll
Well, no episode would be complete without a little bit of conspiracy theory. Over at Gateway Pundit, that's thegatewaypundit.com, Senator Ron Johnson links World Trade Center Building 7 to 9/11 cover-up, demands new investigation. This is by Robert Simonson. Senator Ron Johnson is urging Congress to reopen the investigation into the events of September 11, 2001, focusing in particular on the unexplained collapse of World Trade Center Building 7, which was never hit by an aircraft and remains, in his view, deeply suspect. In an explosive new interview that's turning heads and raising eyebrows, Johnson, known for his America First positions and alignment with President Trump, tore into the official narrative and pointed fingers at what he calls a corrupt investigation by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. Speaking to conservative commentator Benny Johnson, the Wisconsin senator stated, "Let's start with Building 7. I don't know if you can find any building engineers, except those who held the corrupt investigation at NIST, who would say it crashed in some other way than through a controlled demolition." Johnson, who leads the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, is demanding answers and calling out what he sees as a blatant cover-up. Talking about molten steel, just watch the footage. Listen to the documentary Bravo 7 put together by New York firefighters. There are a lot of questions. Who ordered the removal and destruction of all evidence? That's completely contrary to every investigative procedure we have for fire scenes. Who gave that order? Senators' comments came amid renewed interest in launching fresh hearings into the 9/11 attacks, a move that, if realized, could peel back 2 decades of secrecy and government stonewalling. Johnson confirmed that families of numerous victims have reached out to him directly, urging him to fight for the release of unredacted FBI files. "We want to get those answers, those documents for the families," he said. Again, we didn't get squat from the FBI. The official story, which of course only tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy nuts question, is that Building 7 collapsed due to fire damage caused by debris from the nearby Twin Towers. Senator Johnson doesn't buy it, however. Where's all the documentation from NIST investigation? There are a host of questions I want and I will be asking, quite honestly, now that my eyes have been opened, he stated. Senator Johnson is not alone. Former Congressman Kurt Weldon, who's been a longtime critic of the government's version of events, is teaming up with Johnson to bring more facts to light. Weldon has even called on President Trump to appoint people of impeccable integrity to lead a new commission to study the facts behind 9/11. In a separate interview with journalist Tucker Carlson, Weldon pulled no punches. "You know what gets me? Reporters who call people conspiracy theorists. Well, that's all the agency does. They're the ones who create the conspiracies. They have whole courses for their agents on how to make people look like they're conspiracy theorists." Johnson echoed the sentiment and hinted that former President Trump, being a New Yorker himself, might be the right person to finally bring real transparency to the American people. What really happened on September 11th? What do we know? What is hidden? My guess is that there are a lot hidden when it comes to what the U.S. government knows about September 11th, Johnson declared. With speculation mounting that the intelligence community may have played deeper roles than previously disclosed, many conservatives are hoping that President Trump will finally blow the lid off what's been buried for far too long. "I think so," Johnson said when asked whether we'll see public hearings. "And if Trump leads the charge, Americans might finally get the truth they've been denied for more than 2 decades. That's over at thegatewaypundit.com. I know that a lot of these news items all aggregated together, it gives you that sense of doom and gloom. This is the spiritual war we find ourselves in, where the very definition of freedom and choice are traded for small convenience. How long until the expectation is for us to fairly all go to the same size little cell and await instruction? We're not a hive. We're not slaves. We are people. And we, the people, are free not because government decides and declares it, but because it's the way of God's creation, to give us choice, to allow us to grow and make mistakes. For isn't that the very reason for the war in heaven? Lucifer granted all souls would return, but he would get the glory in his guarantees. And that plan, it was rejected. And 1/3 of the hosts of heaven were thrown out when they rebelled. So just remember, when you're feeling like all is lost and we're all alone, we outnumber them, and we've read the book. In the end, God wins. Have hope, have heart, and be happy. Wishing you all a terrific week. This is BACFA.
Thanks for joining us for Atomic Biscuits. Tune in again next week for more news and music. Check out BACFA on Gab at BACFA, as well as Bitchute, Rumble, D-Live and Odysee. Check out LastScoutRadio.com for fun content. Listen to WBN 324 on radio stations around the world, on many streaming platforms, and World Broadcasting Network WBN 324.zil.